Why are things not changing? We can talk about the impacts, we can talk about the effects, but if you only talk about the effects, then we become also part of the problem. So where does the solution lie? When we talk about solutions, we look at, if you are treating a disease, we look at the symptoms of the disease and the disease itself. What we are doing here is talking about the symptoms of the disease. We are not talking about the disease itself. And that disease is carbon emissions. So unless we decarbonize, whatever we try to do in terms of adaptation and resilience is never going to be enough. Here we are talking about resilience, we are talking about adaptation, but there are limits to adaptation. There are limits to resilience. We are asked to formulate national adaptation plans on the one hand, and our carbon emissions increase on the other. How can you solve a problem by making the problem worse? We are growing the problem and then we are talking about solutions. This discourse has to change. And when we talk about emissions, it doesn't really matter, with all due respect, whether Bangladesh and Nepal achieve net zero tomorrow. That is not going to make any difference to the global emissions. The G20 nations account for 81% of global emissions. And if I just think back to what Selvin Hart on behalf of the UN said, we have the moral voice. Yes, we have the moral voice. We talk about climate justice. And yes, climate justice, there are three elements that I would like to bring out. It applies to Nepal, it applies to Bhutan, it applies to Bangladesh. First is, as the Chief Secretary said, those who have least caused the problem are the most impacted, number one. Number two, those who have the least capacity to adapt are being asked to adapt beyond their capacity. And number three, governments are having to choose between fighting climate change and fighting poverty, promoting food security, promoting sustainable development. And that is a greater injustice. No country in the world should have to choose between fulfilling their development aspirations and fighting climate change. Why should it be either or? This is a problem that we have not created. And we saw from the Chief Minister's presentation that you need billions for your adaptation. In Bangladesh, just in this year, we have allocated $3.5 billion to fight climate change among 25 line ministries. That money could have been spent building roads, building hospitals, building educational institutions, empowering the youth, empowering the women, but I'm having to spend it on climate change adaptation. So to me, really, the issue is